At 8:30 on April 16, 1945, Commander Frederick Julian Becton stood on the bridge of USS Laffey, 30 miles north of Okinawa at Radar Picket Station 1, watching his radar operator quietly count contacts. 50 blips. Closing fast. 200 knots. Coming south. Becton was 36 years old. He had already lost 2 ships. He had no intention of losing a third. The Japanese had launched the largest kamikaze strike of the Okinawa campaign, and Laffey was alone, isolated at the northern edge of the radar screen, supported only by 2 small landing craft that could do nothing to help her. Radar Picket 1 was the most dangerous assignment in the fleet. Far from Okinawa, farther still from the carriers. First to see the enemy. First to die. Becton knew exactly what that meant. On November 13, 1942, standing on the bridge of USS Nicholas, he had watched the first USS Laffey burn and sink off Guadalcanal. 59 men went down with her. He could still remember the fire, the screams, the sound of steel tearing apart. Then came April 7, 1943. His own command, USS Aaron Ward, took 3 bomb hits and 2 near misses. 20 killed, 59 wounded, 7 missing. She sank 600 yards from shore, while Becton spent 7 hours fighting to save her. He failed. When the Navy handed him the new Laffey in February 1944, Becton made a promise, to himself, and to every man who would sail under him. This ship would not sink. He trained his crew until they hated him. General quarters in the middle of the night. Damage control drills until men collapsed from exhaustion. Gun crews drilled until they could load, aim, and fire without sight or sound. Sailors complained. Chiefs grumbled. Becton ignored all of it. He had pulled dying men from burning compartments. He had seen destroyers snap in half. He knew what happened to ships that weren't ready. On June 6, 1944, Laffey escorted landing craft to Utah Beach, then screened battleships hammering German defenses. On June 25, coastal batteries at Cherbourg targeted her. She laid smoke, took fire, and survived, without losing a single sailor. Then came the Pacific again. Leyte Gulf, December 1944. Becton watched a kamikaze dive straight into a transport 500 yards away. Everyone topside died instantly. Another destroyer was hit and had to be scuttled. 2 more were crippled. On December 10, 5 more ships burned. Laffey assisted USS Hughes with damage control, burned men screaming, skin sloughing from bone. His crew learned exactly what kamikazes did. Lingayen Gulf, January 6, 1945. 11 ships mauled in one day. Laffey maneuvered through burning oil and floating wreckage, dodging attack after attack. Becton knew the truth no one said aloud. You don't beat odds forever. Eventually, the dice come up wrong. Now it was Okinawa. Laffey arrived at Radar Picket 1 on April 14, the deadliest post in the operation, 30 miles from land, 60 from the fleet. 3 days earlier, USS Cassin Young had been hit here. 1 dead, 59 wounded. April 15th passed quietly. Too quietly. At 8:30, the radar screen filled with targets. Laffey's fighter direction team called for air cover. 4 Wildcats and 12 Corsairs scrambled from USS Shamrock Bay, but they were 8 minutes out. The kamikazes were 3 minutes out. Becton ordered general quarters. 336 men ran to their stations. 5-inch guns were loaded. Fire hoses were charged. Hatches were dogged shut. Below decks, sailors prepared for flooding they hoped would never come. At 8:42, the first enemy aircraft appeared, an Aichi D-3A Val, circling alone at 8,000 feet. A scout. When Laffey opened fire, the pilot jettisoned his bomb and fled north. Becton didn't relax. The Val had radioed their position. Now every kamikaze knew exactly where the lone destroyer waited. At 8:45, Vals broke formation and dove at once. 2 from the starboard bow, 1 from port stern, 1 from starboard stern. Becton reacted instantly. He shouted orders down the voice tube. Hard left rudder. Keep broadside. Bring every gun to bear. Lieutenant Paul Smith, the gunnery officer, sat high in the director. He didn't wait for permission. Mounts 51 and 52 opened fire. The first Val was bracketed at 4,000 yards. 3,000. 2,000. Direct hit. The aircraft disintegrated at 1,500 yards, flaming debris slamming into the sea off the bow. The second Val kept coming. 40-millimeter guns joined in. Then the 20s. At 1,000 yards, the engine began to smoke. At 500 yards, it nosed down and smashed into the water 50 yards from the hull, sending a geyser 40 feet high. The third valve skimmed low from the port stern. Mount 53 tracked it calmly. Fire Controlman Lawrence Dooley, 20 years old, a Pennsylvania farm kid with 6 months at sea, had practiced this shot hundreds of times. He didn't miss now. The aircraft shattered under fire, cartwheeled, and exploded 300 yards astern. The fourth valve came in from starboard stern. Every gun on that side fired at once. Tracers converged. Wings tore free. The plane slammed into the sea 100 yards out. For attackers. For kills. 90 seconds. Becton took a single breath. Then the lookout shouted again. A Yokosuka D-4Y Judy, faster and deadlier than the Val, streaked in on the port beam. Machine guns already firing, stitching the deck of Laffey with steel. And the real fight began. Bullets rang against steel like thrown gravel. One gunner took rounds straight through his flak jacket and stayed on his feet, feeding ammunition as blood soaked his sleeves. The Judy pilot pulled up at 200 yards, too late. A portside 40-millimeter mount tracked him smoothly, fired a short, disciplined burst, and caught the engine. The aircraft rolled inverted and slammed into the sea 500 yards away. 8 minutes since first contact. 5 attackers destroyed. Laffey still fighting clean, but the radar scope told a harsher truth. More than 40 contacts remained. At 8:53, the 6th and 7th attackers came together, one Val from port, one Judy from starboard. A coordinated pincer meant to overload the guns. Becton didn't hesitate. 30 degrees, starboard rudder. Split them. The destroyer heeled, bringing maximum firepower to both arcs. On the port side, the Val used the rising sun perfectly, slipping out of the glare. Gunners squinted and fired anyway. Tracers climbed the aircraft's fuselage, tail, wing, cockpit. The Val caught fire but kept coming, pilot likely already dead, gravity doing the rest. At 300 yards, it released its bomb. It splashed 10 yards off the port beam and detonated, showering the hull in shrapnel. No serious damage. The burning Val skipped across the water and sank. Starboard side was worse. The Judy came in low and fast. Bob Robertson, 19 years old, from Michigan, tracked it with his 20-millimeter like he'd done in 100 drills. Gun Captain Fred Burgess stood beside him, calling corrections. The Judy dropped its bomb early. It detonated alongside the starboard beam. The blast tore through thin hull plating. Shrapnel shredded Robertson's face and chest. Burgess shoved him down, just as a larger fragment nearly severed his left leg below the knee. Both men collapsed. Corpsmen were on them instantly, tourniquets, morphine, dragging them clear. Their gun was replaced within seconds. The Judy didn't survive long enough to turn away. But Laffey had taken her first blood. 2 wounded. No pause. The 8th attacker came from astern, strafing as it dove. Mount 53 opened fire under Fire Controlman Lawrence Dooley. Hits punched the Val's engine cowling and propeller, but it did not slow. Then catastrophe. The Val smashed straight through Mount 25, destroying all 3 aft 20-millimeter guns and killing 6 gunners instantly. The aircraft continued forward, slamming into the starboard corner of Mount 53. The bomb detonated. Flaming aviation fuel washed over the fantail. Fire leapt 60 feet into the air. Becton saw it from the bridge. Flood the aft magazine now. Seawater poured into the magazine spaces, stopping a catastrophic detonation, but Mount 53 was gone. Dooley had been directing fire through the side hatch when the blast threw him 20 feet across the deck. Somehow uninjured, he got up, grabbed an extinguisher, and went straight back into the flames. 10 minutes into the battle. 8 attackers destroyed. 6 dead. 2 wounded. 1 5-inch gun gone. 3 20-millimeter mounts destroyed. Aft fires raging. At last, help arrived. 4 Wildcats screamed overhead, engaging kamikazes before they could dive. 2 were shot down at altitude. It wasn't enough. 12 more aircraft were already committed. At 8:57, the 9th Val came straight out of the sun, dead astern. It dropped its bomb 2 feet inside the deck edge near the wreckage of Mount 53. The bomb punched through the deck and detonated below. 6 more men died instantly. The Val followed its bomb, crashing into what remained of the gun mount and finishing it completely. The aft section of Laffey was now a furnace. Damage control teams fought the fire with hoses, extinguishers, bare hands, anything. Paint blistered 50 feet away. Ammunition cooked off in sharp, violent pops. Men worked knowing exactly what failure meant. Reach the magazine. Ship explodes. Everyone dies. Becton didn't look back. Number 10 was already inbound. Another valve from starboard bow, strafing hard. Guns hit it repeatedly, but the pilot released his bomb anyway. It struck near the fantail again, feeding the inferno. A Corsair finally cut the aircraft apart 200 yards ahead, but too late to stop the damage. 13 minutes. 10 attackers destroyed. 12 dead. More than 20 wounded. Half the aft armament gone. Multiple fires burning out of control. At 9 o'clock exactly, 3 kamikazes attacked at once. This was saturation. More targets than guns. More attackers than defenders. The 11th came from port stern, low and fast. Every portside gun hit it again and again, but it reached the hull. It slammed into the port quarter near the waterline and detonated. An 8-foot hole opened in the hull. Water rushed in. Laffey listed hard to port. Damage control teams ran toward flooding compartments, shoring bulkheads, and starting pumps as seawater climbed ankle-deep. The 12th attacker dove from starboard bow, a Judy in a steep plunge. Forward 5-inch guns tracked. Mount 51 fired. Mississippi Mount 52 fired. Mississippi 40 millimeters opened up at 1,000 yards. And the fight was far from over. Tracers climbed toward the diving aircraft. Hits stitched across the Judy's wing, punched through the fuselage. Smoke streamed from the engine, but the pilot did not break off. At the last moment, the aircraft rolled slightly and slammed into Laffey's starboard side amidships, just above the waterline. The impact punched through the hull. The explosion went off inside the ship. 8 men were killed instantly in the crew's berthing compartment. Fires erupted across the main deck. Electrical cables vaporized. Power failed in sections. The radar scope went dark. Fire control circuits died. From that moment on, Laffey was fighting blind. No radar. No directors. No centralized fire control. Every gun reverted to local control. Men aiming by eye, judging speed, and lead the way they had practiced hundreds of times in drills. The 13th attacker came straight in from dead ahead. Another Val. Mounts 51 and 52 tracked manually, crews shouting corrections. No computers. No bearings. Just instinct and muscle memory. Both 5-inch guns fired. The shells met. The Val exploded in midair at 600 yards. Burning wreckage rained down across the forward deck, starting small fires that sailors beat out with gloved hands and jackets. Becton took in the scene at a glance. Port list, 5 degrees. Fires amidships and aft. Radar dead. Main battery functional, but limited. Half the anti-aircraft guns destroyed or unmanned. Casualties climbing. Flooding controlled, for now. And still the kamikazes kept coming. At 9:03, number 14 appeared, a Val from the port quarter, low and strafing. Its guns killed 2 more gunners before the aircraft slammed into the already shattered aft port side. The explosion widened the hole in the hull. More flooding. List increased to 7 degrees. The chief engineer reported water in 2 compartments. Pumps were running, but barely holding ground. 15 minutes into the battle. 13 enemy aircraft destroyed. 20 dead. 30 wounded. Major fires burning. Ship taking water. At 9:05, number 15 dove. A Judy, fast, nearly 300 knots, from starboard. Forward 5-inch guns fired. Missed. 40 millimeters hit the tail. The aircraft wobbled, but kept coming. 20 millimeter guns opened point blank. Rounds walked up the fuselage, punched through the engine, tore into the cockpit. The Judy rolled hard right, missed Laffey by 20 feet, and exploded in the sea alongside. The blast drenched the deck. Men wiped salt water from their eyes and kept firing. At 9:07, the ship shuddered. The rudder jammed hard to port, damage from underwater explosions. Laffey began turning in tight circles. 26 degrees. Permanent. Becton tried everything. Engines ahead full. Engines astern. Differential thrust. Nothing. The destroyer was locked into a constant left-hand turn. And number 16 was already diving. The Val attacked from starboard as the ship spun helplessly beneath it. Gun crews tracked as best they could, fighting the motion of the deck. Mount 52 fired. A direct hit tore half the Val's wing away. The aircraft cartwheeled into the ocean 50 yards out, but its bomb had already separated. It detonated underwater beside the hull breach. Hull plates buckled. Another leak opened. List increased to 9 degrees. 18 minutes. 15 enemy aircraft destroyed. 23 dead. 35 wounded. Rudder jammed. Flooding increasing. Ships circling uncontrollably. 6 kamikazes still inbound. Becton stood on the bridge. Blood ran down his face from shrapnel wounds. His uniform was torn. Bridge windows were shattered. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. Lieutenant Frank Manson, the assistant communications officer, appeared beside him, young, fresh from Annapolis. Manson looked at the fires, the flooding, the bodies, the circling ship. He asked quietly if they would have to abandon ship. Becton answered without hesitation. No. As long as a single gun could fire, Laffey would fight. Manson nodded and returned to his station. A nearby lookout said softly that he'd keep firing if he could find one man to fire with. Becton didn't hear him. Number 17 attacked at 9:10. Another valve from astern. What remained of the fantail crews fired everything they had left. The aircraft absorbed hits, dropped its bomb, which missed, and then crashed into the already devastated aft section. More fire. More wreckage. The heat grew unbearable. Ready ammunition began detonating. Pop, 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 like fireworks. Sailors grabbed red-hot shells with bare hands and hurled them overboard. Burns didn't matter. Magazine explosions did. Overhead, combat air patrol fought desperately. Wildcats and corsairs intercepted kamikazes at altitude, destroying 3 before they could dive, but the Japanese kept sending more. The math was brutal. 16 radar picket stations. 50 kamikazes in the raid. Laffey alone at the northernmost station. Every pilot saw the smoke. Every pilot knew where the crippled ship was. They all turned toward her. At 9:13, number 18 Dove. A Judy from the port bow. Mount 51 fired, missed by inches. The shock wave rattled the aircraft. 40 millimeters walked tracers up the wing route. The wing folded. The pilot tried to correct. Failed. The plane spun inverted and crashed into the sea 100 yards away. The explosion knocked men flat on deck. 21 minutes into the battle. 17 enemy aircraft destroyed. But the cost was staggering. 26 dead. 40 wounded. Fires burning on 3 levels. Flooding in 4 compartments. List now 11 degrees. Rudder jammed. Ships circling like a wounded animal. And 5 more kamikazes were inbound. Only Becton's training kept the crew functioning. Men who had drilled until collapse now moved on instinct. Gun crews missing half their members pulled replacements straight from damage control parties. There was no panic, only work. Men who had never fired a gun in combat stepped into empty positions. Gunners bleeding from shrapnel wounds kept shooting. No one quit. No one panicked. They had drilled for this. Not this exact nightmare, but close enough that muscle memory took over when fear should have. Number 19 attacked at 9:15. A valve from the starboard quarter. It made a strafing run first, machine guns raking the exposed deck. 3 more sailors fell before the aircraft pulled up into its dive. Mount 52 tracked it smoothly. A direct hit at 800 yards. The valve exploded in midair. Debris scattered across the sea. One more thread erased. 4 remained. Below decks, damage control teams were performing what could only be called miracles. The chief engineer and his men shored up buckling bulkheads with timber beams, welded steel plates over jagged holes, and ran pumps at maximum capacity. Water still poured in faster than it could be expelled, but the ship stayed afloat by inches. The stern sat 3 feet lower than normal. Every underwater blast worsened the flooding. Yet Laffey still fought. Medical spaces were overwhelmed. The ship's doctor and 2 pharmacists' mates worked without pause, treating casualties as fast as they arrived. The wardroom became an emergency surgery. The mess deck turned into triage. Bunks filled. Decks filled. Men lay everywhere, waiting. Morphine ran low. Bandages ran out. The doctor kept working anyway. When Fred Burgess's shattered leg could not be saved, it was amputated with a knife and saw. There was no anesthetic left. Burgess bit down on leather and survived. At 9:18, number 20 attacked. A Judy, straight in from dead ahead. Both forward mounts fired together. Mount 51 hit the propeller. Mount 52 hit the engine. The Judy disintegrated. For the first time in the entire battle, someone cheered. 20 enemy aircraft destroyed. 3 remained. They would be the worst. At 9:20, number 21 appeared. A valve from the port beam. It entered a near-vertical dive, almost straight down. An impossible angle. Guns tried to track it anyway, barrels elevated skyward, shells climbing uselessly past the falling aircraft. The pilot aimed for the bridge. Becton saw it coming and could do nothing. The ship was still circling uncontrollably. No rudder. No maneuvering. No escape. The valve struck 20 feet forward of the bridge. It punched through the deck and detonated inside the forward crew compartment. 11 men died instantly. Bulkheads collapsed. Fires erupted. Smoke poured upward. The bridge crew lost all visibility forward. Laffey began settling faster. The stern slipped deeper into the sea. The bow rose. List increased to 13 degrees. Men struggled to stay upright on slanted decks. Equipment slid. Bodies slid. Still the guns fired. Because Becton had not abandoned ship. And if he stayed, so did they. 25 minutes since the first attack. 21 enemy aircraft destroyed. 37 dead. 53 wounded. The ship was sinking. Fires burned everywhere. Blind. Circling. 1 gun forward still operational. Maybe 2 aft, if the crews were still alive. At 9:23, number 22 appeared. The last kamikaze. Another Val, approaching from the starboard bow. High. Fast. Disciplined. The pilot had watched 21 aircraft fail. He came in perfectly. Textbook dive angle. Straight for the bridge. Kill the captain. Kill command. Kill the ship. Mount 51 tracked him. Fired. Missed. Fired again. Missed again. The crew was exhausted. 26 minutes of continuous combat. Ears bleeding from gun blasts. Arms shaking from loading shells. Eyes burning from smoke. They fired a third time. The shell passed beneath the fuselage. Close. Not close enough. At 1,000 yards, 40mm guns opened fire. Tracers converged, struck the tail, tore fragments free, but the aircraft did not slow. At 800 yards, 20mm guns joined in. Hundreds of rounds per minute stitched toward the cockpit. Engine cowling hit. Windscreen hit. 600 yards. The Val trailed smoke. Still coming. 400 yards. Then a Corsair from Combat Air Patrol dove from above. The pilot had waited for the moment of commitment. No escape. No maneuver. Perfect target. 6. 50 caliber machine guns opened fire. 3,600 rounds per minute. The Val came apart at 300 yards. Wings separated. Fuselage tumbled. The bomb fell free and exploded harmlessly in the water. Debris struck Laffey's deck, starting small fires that crews stamped out by hand. 22 enemy aircraft destroyed. The raid was over. Time: 9:25. 80 minutes since first contact. The longest 80 minutes of naval combat in history. Becton surveyed his ship. The stern was underwater. The bow rose 15 degrees. List to port, 14 degrees. Men clung to railings to keep from sliding overboard. Fires burned on 4 levels. Smoke choked the bridge. Wet rags covered faces. The rudder was jammed. Engines barely ran. Electrical systems were dead. Communications destroyed. Radar gone. Half the armament wiped out. 6 hull breaches. Water gaining. Pumps losing. Confirmed casualties. 32 dead. 71 wounded. The doctor had been operating non-stop for 90 minutes. Hands soaked in blood, face gray with exhaustion. Still working, still saving lives. But the sky was clear now. Combat Air Patrol circled overhead, guarding the crippled destroyer. At 9:30, the minesweeper Macomb appeared on the horizon. She came alongside at 9:45, passing over hoses, pumps, and fresh damage control teams. Her crew joined the fight to save Laffey. And for the first time since dawn, the destroyer was no longer alone. Landing craft support LCS 51 and LCS 116, which had fought beside Laffey for the entire engagement, moved closer once the skies cleared. Between them, they had shot down 6 kamikazes. Now their mission changed. They passed over additional pumps and firefighting equipment. Medical supplies followed. Wounded sailors were transferred to their small sick bays, giving Laffey's exhausted doctor a chance to breathe, briefly. At 10 o'clock, fleet tug Picana arrived. She took Laffey under tow. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the destroyer was pulled away from radar picket station number 1, away from the kill zone, towards safety. 3 knots. No faster. Laffey rode so low in the water that waves washed over the stern. Men bailed with buckets. Every sailor not fighting fires was pumping water. Every sailor not pumping was carrying wounded, shoring bulkheads, or dragging hoses through smoke-filled passageways. By 11 o'clock, damage control teams had contained the worst fires. Not extinguished. Contained. Still burning. Still dangerous. But no longer spreading. Flooding was stabilized. Not stopped. Stabilized. Water continued to enter, but pumps barely kept pace. The ship still settled, but slowly. She was not sinking. Not yet. Becton never left the bridge. He stood there for 7 straight hours. Blood dried on his face. His uniform was soaked with seawater and sweat. His voice was gone from shouting orders. Still he commanded. Still he led. Men looked up at him and found strength. If the captain wasn't quitting, neither were they. By 1400 hours, Okinawa had towed Laffey 15 miles south, farther from the combat zone, closer to the fleet. Air cover was thick now. Wildcats. Corsairs. Hellcats. Nothing was getting through to finish her off. Medical reports were updated. 32 confirmed dead. 7 missing, presumed dead in flooded compartments. 71 wounded. 23 critical, 48 stable. Every man had fought. Every man had bled. Engineering assessment followed. 6 kamikaze impacts. 4 bomb hits. Multiple near misses. Hull breaches in 8 locations. 3 compartments completely flooded. 2 more partially flooded. Main deck structurally compromised. Superstructure wrecked. Mast bent. Rudder mechanism destroyed. 1 shaft damaged. 50% of armament destroyed or inoperable. By every reasonable standard, Laffey should have sunk. She hadn't. April 17th, dawn. Okinawa anchored Laffey off Okinawa. Temporary repairs began immediately. Welders sealed the worst hull breaches. Carpenters shored up weakened bulkheads. Pumps ran continuously. After 18 hours, the fires were finally extinguished. The ship still listed. Still rode low. But she was stable. On April 27th, Laffey reached Saipan under her own power. Barely. 1 engine. Emergency steering. But moving. On May 24th, she arrived at Tacoma, Washington, and entered dry dock at Todd shipyards. Repair estimates ran for months. Costs were high, but approved without hesitation. During 80 minutes off Okinawa, Laffey had earned something no budget could measure. A name. The ship that would not die. Captain Frederick Moosbrugger of Task Force 51. 5 sent Becton a message on April 22nd. He wrote that as long as Laffey remained somewhere in the Pacific, the Navy would always know where to find punch in a pinch. He added one final line. They'll remember that Laffey laughs last. The nickname stuck. Newspapers printed it. Radio broadcasts repeated it. The ship that survived 22 kamikaze attacks. The ship that took 10 direct hits, 4 bombs, 6 aircraft crashes. The ship that kept fighting when every regulation said she should sink. Naval analysts studied the battle, trying to understand why Laffey lived when so many others did not. Destroyer Manard L. Able, hit by 2 kamikazes on April 12th, sank in 4 minutes. Destroyer Bush, hit by 3 on April 6th, sank in 2 hours. Destroyer Colhoun, hit by 4 the same day, sank in 30 minutes. All newer ships. All well-trained crews. All lost. Laffey took 10 hits and lived. Analysts identified 3 reasons. First, Becton's training. Obsessive drilling. Relentless exercises. Men performing under impossible stress because they had practiced under simulated terror. Gun crews reloaded while wounded because they had reloaded blindfolded in drills. Damage control teams shored bulkheads in smoke because they had practiced in darkness. Training saved the ship. Second, the jammed rudder. A 26-degree permanent turn caused by underwater explosions. A failure that should have doomed her, but didn't. The constant circling forced kamikaze pilots to adjust mid-dive. Many misjudged. They hit the water, hit non-vital sections, hit areas already wrecked. The damage that should have killed Laffey made her harder to hit. Third, compartmentalization. Allen M. Sumner-class destroyers had superior internal subdivision. More watertight compartments. Stronger bulkheads. Better fire breaks. One compartment flooded, others held. Fire spread, fire breaks stopped it. Magazines flooded without loss of buoyancy. Medical teams operated while combat raged above. Each system independent. each compartment isolated. But the real reason went deeper than training, design, or luck. It was the crew. 336 men who refused to quit. Gunners firing with shrapnel in their chests. Loaders loading with burned hands. Engineers pumping with water at their knees. Damage control parties fighting fires while kamikazes crashed overhead. Corpsmen treating wounded while bombs detonated nearby. They refused to abandon ship because Becton refused to abandon ship. And Becton refused because he had already lost too. He had watched Aaron Ward sink. He had seen the first Laffey burn and go under. He knew what it looked like when a destroyer died. He knew what it sounded like. And this time, it would not happen again. He knew how men screamed. He knew the sound of steel tearing open. He knew the rush of cold seawater flooding compartments. He knew how fire moved through a ship. Fast, hungry, unstoppable if unchecked. He knew all of it. And he decided it would not happen again. Not to his ship. Not to his crew. Not on his watch. That decision, made months earlier at Bath Iron Works while Laffey was still being built, saved 304 lives on April 16, 1945. The awards came later. The entire ship received the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest honor a naval unit can receive. The citation stated that Laffey fought valiantly against waves of hostile suicide aircraft plunging toward her from all directions, that she established relentless barrages of anti-aircraft fire during an extremely heavy and concentrated air attack, that she suffered severe structural damage, loss of armament, and heavy personnel casualties, yet emerged at the close of action still afloat and still an effective fighting unit. Becton received the Navy Cross. His citation noted that he skillfully countered fanatical enemy tactics, employed every conceivable maneuver, directed all guns in an intense and unrelenting barrage, retained complete control despite overwhelming aerial force, and fought fiercely for over 2 hours, personally blasting 8 enemy aircraft from the sky while 6 crashed into his ship. Ensign Robert Thompson received a posthumous Navy Cross, killed by a kamikaze while directing damage control parties and continuing to fight until the moment of impact. 6 Silver Stars, 18 Bronze Stars, 1 Navy Letter of Commendation. Recognition distributed among the crew for extraordinary heroism under fire. Lieutenant Howell Sharing, commanding LCS 51, also received the Navy Cross. His small landing craft shot down 6 aircraft while defending Laffey, remaining in position despite being outgunned, exposed, and vulnerable. But numbers and medals do not explain what really happened that morning. They don't capture what it felt like to stand on a burning deck while aircraft dove from every direction. They don't convey the sound of 5-inch guns firing continuously for 80 minutes. They don't describe the smell, burning flesh, cordite, fuel oil, and seawater. They don't express the exhaustion of loading shells until shoulders dislocated. They don't translate the fear of watching friends die. Courage does not convert easily into words. What happened off Okinawa on April 16th was something rarer than heroism. It was collective refusal. 336 individuals making the same decision at the same time. We will not sink. We will not surrender. We will not stop fighting. The Japanese could hit them 10 times, 20 times. They would take the hits and keep shooting because their captain said they would. And they trusted their captain. He had already lost 2 ships. He would not lose this one. So neither would they. That kind of unity does not happen by accident. It doesn't come from speeches. It doesn't come from slogans or propaganda. It comes from months of brutal training. From a captain who values preparedness over popularity. From officers who lead by example. From petty officers who refuse mediocrity. From sailors who trust their training even when logic says panic would be easier. Laffey completed repairs in September 1945. The war was over by then. Japan surrendered on August 15th. No more kamikazes. No more combat. But the Navy wanted Laffey back in service. They wanted the ship that would not die operational again. In November 1945, Laffey participated in Operation Crossroads, the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. She survived. She collected radiation data. She proved she could endure nuclear weapons, too. After decontamination, she entered the Pacific Reserve Fleet. Then came Korea. June 1950, North Korea invaded the South. The United Nations responded. The Navy needed destroyers. Laffey was recommissioned. From October 1950 through July 1953, She participated in the blockade of Wonsan, the longest naval blockade in American history. 861 days. She fired thousands of rounds at shore targets, supported marine operations, intercepted supply vessels, survived mine strikes, survived shore batteries. The ship that would not die in World War II did not die in Korea either. After the armistice in July 1953, Laffey was decommissioned again, this time permanently. Becton's career continued upward. Promoted to captain in January 1951. Commanded destroyer divisions. Served in the Bureau of Naval Personnel. Commanded the transport USS General Glenn. Served in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. In September 1956, he took command of USS Iowa. 60,000 tons. 16-inch guns. Flagship material. A destroyer captain commanding a battleship, a rare honor. In 1958, he became director of the Enlisted Personnel Division, shaping Navy training policy for thousands of sailors. He applied lessons learned off Okinawa. Emphasis on damage control, on redundancy, on preparation. His experience aboard Laffey influenced Navy doctrine for decades. Promoted to Rear Admiral. Retired in 1966 after 35 years of service. He settled in Wynwood, Pennsylvania with his wife Elizabeth. 2 daughters. A quiet retirement. He wrote memoirs. Attended reunions. Never forgot his crew. Never forgot April 16th. The crew scattered after the war. Returned to farms, factories, offices. Became civilians again. But they stayed in touch. Annual reunions. Letters. Phone calls. Men who fought for 80 minutes together remained brothers for life. Lawrence Dooley returned to Pennsylvania. Became a machinist. Raised a family. He rarely spoke about the war. But he kept his Navy Cross in a drawer. Sometimes he took it out. He remembered the day Mount 53 took 2 kamikaze hits. Remembered being blown clear. Remembered grabbing a fire extinguisher. Remembered fighting flames while the world burned. Bob Robertson lost his left eye to shrapnel. He received a medical discharge. Returned home to Michigan. Became a teacher. He taught history. Sometimes he told his students about Laffey. Sometimes he showed them his Purple Heart. He explained what kamikazes were, why men fought, why ships mattered. The students listened. They learned. They remembered. Fred Burgess survived the loss of his leg. He received a prosthetic, learned to walk again, became a carpenter, a one-legged carpenter. He built houses, built furniture, built a life. He never complained. The men who watched him shove Robertson to the deck, who saw him take the shrapnel meant for the younger sailor, never forgot. That is what real heroism looks like. Not charging forward, not speeches, not medals, stepping into danger so someone else lives. The ship's doctor received a commendation for treating 71 wounded under combat conditions. He stayed in the Navy, became a hospital administrator, taught new doctors what he had learned aboard Laffey. Emphasis on triage, on speed, on working under pressure, on making impossible decisions quickly. Those lessons saved countless lives long after the war ended. In 1962, the Navy declared Laffey excess, scheduled for scrapping. Veterans objected. The ship that would not die should not die in a scrapyard. The protests worked. Laffey was preserved, designated a memorial, donated to Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. She arrived in 1981, moored beside aircraft carrier Yorktown. Open to the public. Visitors could walk the decks, stand on the bridge where Becton commanded, see Mount 53, where Dooley fought, see the damage, touch history. In 1986, Laffey was declared a National Historic Landmark. She remains the only American-owned Allen M. Sumner class destroyer preserved for surviving a mass kamikaze attack. But time is relentless. Saltwater, rust, neglect. By 2008, more than 100 leaks had opened in her hull. The ship was slowly sinking at her mooring. Officials feared she would be lost. Repairs would cost $9 million. South Carolina provided a loan. In August 2009, Laffey was towed to dry dock. Hull repaired, rust removed, new plating installed, fresh paint applied. She returned to Patriots Point in April 2010, 65 years to the day after the kamikaze attack. The ship that would not die off Okinawa would not die at the dock either. Today, USS Laffey sits at Patriots Point, open daily. Visitors walk the decks where 336 men fought for their lives. Stand on the bridge where Becton commanded. Touch the guns that fired for 80 minutes straight. See damage that should have sunk her. Mount 53 still bears impact scars. Deck plating still shows bomb damage. Hull patches remain visible. Bridge windows are still cracked. Nothing hidden. Nothing polished away. Walk through the ship and you understand. Not intellectually, but viscerally. Educational programs bring school groups. Students learn about World War II, about kamikazes, about naval combat. But more importantly, they learn about discipline, preparation, refusing to quit when quitting makes sense, trusting your team, leadership under fire, lessons that go far beyond history. Veterans still visit. World War II veterans, fewer each year. Korea veterans still coming. Their children, their grandchildren, they come to remember. To make sure April 16th, 1945 does not fade into footnotes. Frederick Julian Becton died on December 25, 1995. Christmas Day, age 87. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full honors. His wife Elizabeth survived him. 2 daughters, grandchildren, all proud. Not just that he saved Laffey, but that he trained men well enough to survive Laffey. His legacy is not medals, not promotions, not even the ship. His legacy is proof that preparation matters. That training is not punishment. That drilling until men hate you may save their lives later. That leadership means caring more about readiness than popularity. Every naval officer studies Becton's command style. Every damage control school teaches Laffey's survival. Every leadership course references April 16th. Because the lessons are timeless. Laffey earned 5 battle stars in World War II, 2 battle stars in Korea, a Presidential Unit citation, numerous other decorations. But the real achievement is 304 men who survived, who went home, who raised families, who lived full lives. The Japanese expected Laffey to sink after the first few hits. Most destroyers struck by more than 3 kamikazes did. Laffey took 10 direct hits. She should have sunk 5 times over. She didn't. She kept fighting, kept floating, kept firing. The Japanese kept attacking because they could not believe she was still operational. They assumed the next hit would finish her. It never did. That is what shocked the Japanese command. Not American industry, not American technology, American determination, the ability to absorb punishment and keep fighting, to lose half your weapons and continue firing, to take catastrophic casualties and maintain discipline, to face near-certain death and refuse to quit. That forced a recalculation. If one destroyer could survive 22 kamikazes, how many could the fleet endure? If one crew could fight that hard, what would an invasion of Japan cost? The mathematics became impossible. The casualties unacceptable. The war became unwinnable. Laffey did not win World War II, but she demonstrated why America would. Not through machines, not through numbers, through training, through leadership, through men who refused to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed inevitable. April 16, 1945, 30 miles north of Okinawa. 80 minutes that defined naval combat. 80 minutes that proved what preparation can accomplish. 80 minutes that saved 304 lives. 80 minutes that earned a name. The ship that would not die. And nearly 8 decades later, she still hasn't.